Rain poured from the dark sky, turning the ground into a thick, muddy swamp in the middle of a broken street. A young alien woman sat in an old wheelchair, her deep violet skin glistening with cold water. Her hair, long and black, clung to her cheeks and neck, dripping with rain. The wheels of her chair were stuck deep in the mud, and her cybernetic legs were lifeless, their metal parts covered in dirt. She looked down at her hands, trying not to see the people who passed by. They all walked fast, heads turned away, pretending she wasn't there. She had seen this many times. The way her own people ignored her, as if she did not exist, in their eyes. She was not just disabled, she was a burden, a curse, someone better left behind. The rain grew heavier, splashing into the brown water around her chair. Her clothes were soaked, clinging to her thin body, making her shiver. She hugged herself, feeling the cold seep into her bones. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Crying never helped, and no one cared enough to notice anyway. Suddenly, the sound of slow, heavy steps approached. She lifted her head just a little, her eyes narrowing. A man was walking toward her, different from the others. His skin was light, his beard trimmed, his clothes simple, a gray shirt and shorts, already soaked from the rain. He was not from this planet. She could tell instantly. A human. He stopped a few feet away, looking at her. Not with pity, not with fear, but with something else, something warm. He crouched down so his eyes met hers. "Looks like you're stuck," he said in a calm voice. The rain dripping from his hair. She stayed silent, unsure if he was mocking her. "Do you need help?" he asked, his voice steady. She hesitated, her lips pressing together. Everyone who ever offered help before had wanted something in return, and it was never kindness. The man glanced at her damaged cybernetic legs. Without waiting for permission, he moved closer and checked the wheelchair. Mud clung to the wheels, making them impossible to turn. "You've been here a while," he said softly. She finally spoke, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. "It doesn't matter," she said. "No one cares." He looked up at her, his eyes steady. "I care," he said simply. Her chest tightened at those words. She wanted to believe him, but trust was a dangerous thing still. She watched as he pushed against the chair, trying to free it from the mud. The rain made the ground slippery, but he kept trying, his arms straining. Finally, with a loud squelch, the wheels came loose. He stepped back, breathing hard. "You're free now," he said, a small smile on his face. She blinked, not sure what to say. "You helped me," she murmured. "Of course," he replied. "Why wouldn't I?" She looked away, her heart pounding. "No one from here would," she said, bitterness in her tone. "I'm not from here," he said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. He wiped the rain from his face and extended his hand toward her. "My name is Daniel," he said. She didn't take his hand. "Not yet. What do you want from me?" she asked sharply. His smile faded just a little, replaced with something serious. "Nothing," he said, "except to make sure you're not left out here in the rain." She stared at him, searching for a lie in his eyes. But all she saw was determination. Her fingers twitched, and for a moment she almost reached for his hand. Then she pulled back, shaking her head. "I can't go anywhere," she said. "My legs are broken." He glanced at her again. "Then I'll push you," he said, as if it were the easiest answer in the world. Her eyes widened. "No one carries the broken," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I do," he said firmly. "If you trust me, I can get you out of here. But it will change both our lives forever." The rain fell harder, the world around them blurring into gray and brown. She looked at him, this strange human who spoke as if her life mattered. Her heart told her to say yes, but her mind screamed to be careful. Still, something inside her shifted. A small spark of hope she thought was gone. For the first time in years, she didn't feel completely alone. And in that moment, under the heavy rain, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this man was telling the truth. The rain had not stopped since the moment Daniel first spoke to her. It fell in thick, cold sheets, drumming against the cracked streets and the broken rooftops above. Lyra sat in her wheelchair, the mud splashing against her boots, as Daniel stood beside her, waiting for an answer. He had freed her wheels from the mud, but the real weight keeping her here was not the dirt, it was the years of rejection. The chains of mistrust. Every part of her wanted to say no, to turn him away before he could, betray her like the others, but he was still standing there, rain soaking through his shirt, eyes steady, not looking away, not walking off. No one had ever waited like that. She lowered her gaze, her voice barely above the sound of the rain. If I go with you, they will say I'm your burden, she murmured. Daniel crouched down again, so his eyes were level with hers. Let them talk, he said simply. Her lips pressed together, unsure how to answer. She thought of the last time she had trusted someone, a traitor, who promised food, but left her in the street, after stealing what little she had. Trust was dangerous, and yet, something about this human was different. Daniel adjusted the straps on her wheelchair, checking the locking mechanisms. You're freezing, he said. We need to get you somewhere dry. She frowned. You don't even know my name, she said. He smiled faintly. Then tell me, he replied. She hesitated, then spoke. Lyra, she said softly. Lyra, he repeated, as if testing the sound. That's a good name. The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the rain. 2 tall alien men appeared from the shadows of a collapsed building. Their armor dented and rusty. They walked straight toward them. Their eyes locked on Lyra. One of them pointed, his voice rough. You shouldn't be here, human, he growled. Do you know what she is? Daniel didn't flinch. I see someone who needs help, he said. The other alien sneered. She's cursed, broken metal and weak flesh. Anyone who stays near her will share her fate. Lyra's hands gripped the sides of her chair. She knew these men. She had seen them before, always looking at her like she was something filthy. She expected Daniel to step back, to walk away and save himself. Instead, he moved slightly in front of her, blocking their view. Then I guess I'll share it, he said, his voice firm. The taller alien laughed, a cruel, echoing sound. Humans are foolish, he said, before turning away. The two of them walked off, disappearing into the misty rain. Lyra stared at Daniel, stunned. Why did you do that? She asked, her voice shaking. Because you don't leave someone behind just because others tell you to? He replied, her heart beat faster. No one had ever stood between her and danger before, not her family, not the strangers who passed her on the street. Daniel was a complete stranger, yet he had done it without hesitation. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or afraid. Her mind screamed at her to keep her distance, but her hands wanted to reach out to him. He began pushing her wheelchair through the rain, the wheels cutting shallow lines in the mud. Where are you taking me? She asked. To my camp, he said. It's dry there. I have food, and I can try to fix your legs. Her breath caught. You can't fix them. They've been broken for years, she said. He shrugged. Then I'll find a way, he replied. Humans don't like giving up. The streets were empty now. Just the sound of rain hitting the water. Every push of the wheelchair made her feel the distance growing between her and the place she had been stuck for so long. It felt unreal, as if any moment she would wake up and be back in the same muddy spot. But Daniel's presence was real, his footsteps steady, his hands firm on the handles of her chair. When they reached a cracked stone bridge, he stopped and stepped in front of her. The rain dripped from his chin as he crouched down once more. I'm not forcing you, he said. If you want me to leave, I'll leave right now. She looked at him, the rain blurring his features. In that moment, she realized this was the choice she had been avoiding for years. She could let him go, and nothing would change, or she could trust him and risk everything. Her voice was trembling when she spoke. If I say yes, you won't regret it. He smiled faintly. No, he said. I don't regret helping people. She took a slow breath, her eyes locking on his. Then, take me with you, she said. His smile grew warmer. All right, Lyra, he said. Let's get you home. And as he began pushing her across the bridge, the rain still falling all around them, she felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. The streets were almost silent now, the rain slowing to a soft drizzle. Lyra sat in her wheelchair as Daniel pushed her forward, the wheels leaving 2 long tracks through the wet dirt. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting those 2 alien men to come back. Daniel noticed. They won't bother us, he said, his voice steady. You don't know them, she replied, her tone low. I don't have to, he answered. I just know they're cowards. They moved past a row of broken market stalls. Their roofs collapsed from years of neglect. Faded signs hung crooked, their paint peeling. Lyra had been here many times before, scavenging scraps, avoiding the glares of the stall owners, but this time was different. She wasn't alone. People noticed. Some stared in shock, some in disgust, others whispered behind their hands. A human pushing a disabled alien down the street was not something they saw every day. Daniel ignored them all. His eyes stayed forward, his hands firm on the wheelchair handles. Lyra felt strange. She had spent her life trying to be invisible, and now she was at the center of everyone's attention. She didn't know if she liked it or hated it. They turned a corner, and the smell of damp metal filled the air. The narrow road led to the outskirts, where old factories stood like rusted skeletons. This way, Daniel said, guiding her toward a path she didn't know. Where exactly is your camp? She asked. Beyond the old freight yard, he replied. It's quiet there. No one to bother us. She frowned. You've been here long enough to set up camp. He shook his head. No, I arrived 2 days ago, but I know how to find safe places. As they crossed a wide open space, movement caught her eye. 3 alien youths stepped out from behind a wrecked transport vehicle, blocking the path. Their clothes were ragged, their eyes sharp with mischief. One of them smirked. Look at this, he said. The broken one found herself a pet human. Lyra's stomach twisted. She had heard insults before, but somehow, it stung more when they were thrown in front of someone who had helped her. Daniel stopped the wheelchair, his voice calm. You should step aside, he said. The tallest youth laughed. And if we don't? Daniel took 1 slow step forward. Then, I'll make you, he said quietly. The laughter faded, replaced with an uneasy silence. There was something in his voice, not anger, not threat, but certainty. The youths exchanged glances, then backed away without another word, disappearing into the shadows. Lyra stared at him. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did, he replied, pushing her forward again. She bit her lip, unsure how to respond. He made it look so easy, standing up to people, refusing to be intimidated. She wondered how much of that was human nature, and how much was just him. They reached the freight yard just as the light began to fade. The sky turned a deep purple, the first stars faintly visible above. Rows of abandoned cargo containers stretched across the field, stacked high like giant bricks. Daniel guided her between them until they reached a small clearing. There, under the shelter of 2 tilted containers, was a makeshift camp, a fire pit, a tarp overhead, and a pile of supplies. This is it, he said. It's better than I expected, she admitted, her voice soft. He grinned. That's a compliment. I'll take it. Daniel helped her to a spot near the fire pit and began unloading his bag. He pulled out a sealed pack of food and a small pot, setting it over the fire. The smell of warm broth soon filled the air. Lyra's stomach growled, but she tried to hide it. He noticed anyway. Hungry? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He handed her a steaming bowl. She held it carefully, letting the heat warm her fingers before taking a sip. It was simple, but it was the first hot meal she had eaten in weeks. For a while, they sat in silence, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Then Daniel spoke. "Tomorrow, I'll take a look at your legs," he said. "Maybe I can fix them enough so you can walk again." Her chest tightened. "You really think you can?" she asked. He shrugged. "I've fixed worse," he replied. "Machines. Anyway, never had the honor of helping someone as stubborn as you." She almost smiled. Almost. That night, as the fire burned low, Lyra stayed awake, watching Daniel. As he worked on cleaning his gear, every movement was careful, deliberate. He didn't seem like someone looking for a reward. He didn't seem like someone who would abandon her when things got hard. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to think that maybe, just maybe, she had made the right choice. The night air was cold and still. The fire in the small pit burned low, its orange glow dancing over the walls of the stacked cargo containers. Daniel sat cross-legged near the flames, his hands busy with a small toolkit. Lyra sat across from him. Her wheelchair pulled closer so she could feel the warmth. The sound of soft rain on the tarp above filled the quiet. For a while neither of them spoke, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was the kind that made you feel safe. Daniel adjusted the light on his wristband, leaning forward to examine the damaged joints of her cybernetic legs. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward them. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. He knelt beside her, his hands working carefully, brushing away dirt and dried mud. Some of the metal was bent, wires frayed, gears stiff from rust. "Who built these for you?" he asked. She looked away. "My parents ordered them when I was a child," she said softly, "but they stopped repairs when I was 10, said it was a waste." Daniel paused, his brows drawing together. "A waste?" he repeated. "In our society," she explained, "if you can't contribute like the others, you're a burden. Repairs cost credits. Credits go to the strong, not the broken." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were far away. He shook his head, muttering something under his breath. "That's not strength. That's cruelty," he said finally. She gave a small, bitter laugh. "You think it's cruel, but to them it's normal." Daniel tightened a screw, the sound of metal clicking, filling the space between them. "I don't care if it's normal," he said firmly. "Leaving someone behind because they're not perfect is wrong." For a moment, she studied his face. The firelight made his eyes look warmer, his jawline sharper. She wondered if all humans spoke like this, or if it was just him. "You talk like you believe everyone has value," she said. "I do," he answered without hesitation. "Even me?" she asked quietly. He looked up from her legs and met her gaze. "Especially you," he said. Her chest tightened. No one had ever said those words to her before. She quickly looked away, focusing on the fire so he wouldn't see the heat rising in her cheeks. Daniel reached into his pack and pulled out a small container of oil. "These joints haven't been moved properly in years," he said, "but they're not beyond saving." "You really think you can fix them?" she asked. "I can get them working," he said. "It'll hurt, but you'll be able to stand. Maybe even walk for a while." She swallowed hard. "Why? Why would you do that for me?" He shrugged. "Because I can, and because you deserve better than this." Her mind went back to the streets earlier that day, the way people had stared at her, the insults, the looks, the way they all wanted her to vanish. And now here was a human, someone who owed her nothing, spending his night in the cold trying to make her legs work again. It didn't make sense, and yet it felt right, as he worked. The smell of warm metal and oil mixed with the smoke from the fire. He told her about the places he had traveled, the people he had met. Some stories made her laugh softly. Others made her shake her head. In return, she told him about her childhood, the games she used to play before her legs failed completely. Her voice faltered when she spoke of the day her parents stopped coming for her. "They didn't even say goodbye," she said, her fingers curling into her lap. "They just left me with an empty house and a note telling me I'd be better off finding my own way." Daniel's hands stilled. "That's not family," he said, his voice low. Her throat tightened. "It's all I knew," she whispered. "Not anymore," he said, going back to work. You're with me now. Those words echoed in her mind long after he said them. With each careful adjustment he made, her legs began to feel different. There was still pain, but also a strange warmth as the joints loosened and the wires hummed faintly. Finally, Daniel sat back, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Try moving them," he said. She hesitated, then slowly shifted her weight. The metal clicked softly as one leg bent just a little. Her breath caught. It moved. She whispered. "Good," he said with a grin. "That's a start." They stayed by the fire a little longer, the rain softening outside. Lyra didn't realize she had been smiling until Daniel glanced at her and smiled back. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt seen, and as the firelight flickered in the quiet night, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she was ready to believe him. The next morning began with pale light slipping through the gaps between the cargo containers. The air smelled fresh after the night's rain, and small puddles shimmered on the ground. Daniel was already awake, preparing supplies for the day. Lyra stirred in her wheelchair, blinking against the early light. Her legs still ached from the repairs, but she could feel movement in them, small, but real. It was the first time in years she had woken up with the hope of standing again. "Eat," Daniel said, handing her a warm ration pack. "We've got a long day ahead." She frowned. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To the village," he replied. "I need tools to finish fixing your legs, and food that isn't out of a packet." The word village made her chest tighten. "Daniel, they won't welcome me there," she warned. "They don't have to," he said simply. "I'm not going for their welcome." By midday, they reached the edge of the village. The dirt road curved between small houses with slanted roofs and bright cloth banners fluttering in the breeze. It might have looked peaceful to anyone else, but to Lyra, every step closer felt like stepping back into an old nightmare. As soon as the villagers saw her, the whispers began. Children stared openly. Adults looked away as if she were a stain. On the ground, one woman muttered loudly, "She still lives. The broken one." Daniel kept pushing her forward, ignoring the looks. They stopped in front of a supply shop, its walls lined with tools and spare mechanical parts. The shopkeeper, a short, broad alien with pale green skin, glanced at Lyra and narrowed his eyes. "No charity," he said. "We don't deal with the useless here." Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "She's not useless, and I'm not asking for charity. I'm buying." The shopkeeper's gaze shifted between them. "You're human," he said slowly. "You don't know what she is." "I know enough," Daniel replied. The shopkeeper leaned closer, his voice dropping. "If you stay near her, you'll share her curse." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then I'll share it," he said, the same words he had used yesterday. To the thugs in the street, a murmur rose behind them. Villagers had stopped to watch. An old woman stepped forward, her back bent, but her eyes sharp. "You speak for her," she said to Daniel. "Do you claim her as yours?" Lyra froze in her chair. She knew what the old woman was asking. It was no casual question. In her culture, to claim someone in public was to declare a bond, a sacred tie that could not be broken. Daniel didn't even hesitate. "Yes," he said. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lyra's breath caught. "You don't know what you just said," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I know exactly what I said," he replied. "I will bond with you." The old woman raised her head. "Then, by our law, you must take the bonding trial," she said. Daniel nodded. "Tell me what I need to do." Lyra's heart pounded. "Daniel, you can't," she said urgently. "It's dangerous." He looked down at her and smiled faintly. "Dangerous doesn't scare me." The old woman explained the trial. They must travel together through the Valley of Shards, a stretch of land filled with jagged crystal spires that cut through skin and metal alike. Only by reaching the sacred altar on the other side could the bond be sealed. If either one failed to make it, the bond would be rejected, and both would be shamed. Lyra stared at him. "You're risking your life for this," she said. "For you," he corrected gently. The villagers stepped back to give them space. Some looked at Daniel with curiosity, others with disbelief. No outsider had ever willingly taken the bonding trial for someone like her. Daniel leaned down so they were eye to eye. "I told you, Lyra, I don't leave people behind," he said. Her throat tightened. She had no words, only a silent nod. That evening, they set out toward the Valley of Shards. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The wind carried a faint, high-pitched hum, the sound of the crystal spires singing in the distance. Daniel pushed her chair steadily, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Lyra sat quietly, watching him. Every step he took made it harder for her to remember the walls she had built around herself. This wasn't pity, she realized. It was something stronger, something she didn't dare name yet. The first step into the Valley of Shards was like stepping into another world. The ground was uneven and littered with sharp crystal fragments that crunched under Daniel's boots. The air shimmered faintly with light reflecting off the towering spires, each one glowing with a pale blue hue. The sound of the wind made the crystals hum, a ghostly song that echoed through the valley. Lyra sat in her wheelchair, eyes wide as she took in the alien beauty of the place. But she knew better than to be distracted. Beauty here could cut deep. Daniel pushed the wheelchair slowly, carefully, avoiding the larger shards that jutted up from the ground like spears. Each movement was deliberate, his hands steady, even when the wheels slipped on loose stones. "You can still turn back," Lyra said quietly. "Not an option," he replied without looking up. Her heart tightened. She had said those words before to others, but they had always taken the chance to leave. He wasn't leaving. They moved deeper into the valley, the spires growing taller and closer together. The path narrowed until Daniel had to turn the chair sideways to fit it through. More than once, the jagged edges scraped the sides of the wheelchair, leaving long scratches in the metal. The sound made Lyra flinch. "These crystals," she murmured, "they're sharp enough to cut through bone." Daniel's voice was calm. "Then we don't let them." An hour into the journey, the ground became steeper. Daniel leaned forward, pushing harder as the chair resisted the incline. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his breath coming heavier. Lyra's hands gripped the armrests. "Daniel, this is too much," she said. "We'll both get hurt." He shook his head. "I told you, Lyra, we finish this together." Then came the first true obstacle, a collapsed section of the path. The ground ahead had caved in, leaving only a narrow ridge along the side of a crystal wall. It was barely wide enough for a person to walk, let alone push a wheelchair. Daniel stopped, studying it. "There's no way across with the chair," Lyra said, her voice tense. "There's one way," he replied, kneeling down. Before she could protest, he slid his arms under her, lifting her out of the wheelchair with surprising ease. Her hands instinctively clutched at his shoulders. "You'll drop me," she whispered. "Not a chance," he said. He stepped carefully along the ridge, his boots scraping against the stone. Every gust of wind sent a shiver of crystal song through the valley. Below them, the drop was sharp and glittering with jagged shards. Lyra kept her eyes on his face, trying not to look down. His jaw was set, his gaze fixed forward. When they reached the other side, he set her down gently on a smooth patch of ground. Her breath came fast. "You carried me," she said in disbelief. "I told you I would," he replied simply. They retrieved the wheelchair and continued. The path wound upward, leading to a narrow archway of crystal that pulsed faintly with light. "This is the halfway mark," Lyra said, her voice low. "How do you know?" he asked. "I was brought here once, when they wanted me to watch another fail," she admitted. Daniel glanced at her. "Then this time, you'll watch us succeed," he said. The last stretch was the hardest. Loose crystal shards covered the ground, making it slippery. At one point, Daniel's boot slid, and he nearly lost his balance. Lyra reached out, gripping his arm. "Careful," she said sharply. He smiled faintly. "Worried about me?" She looked away, but didn't let go until he was steady again. Finally, the altar came into view, a flat stone platform surrounded by tall, spiraling crystal pillars. It glowed faintly, casting soft blue light over the clearing. Daniel pushed her forward until they were both standing and sitting in the center. "What happens now?" he asked. "The bond," she said quietly. "If the altar accepts us, we'll be tied together by oath, by law, by spirit, and if it doesn't?" he asked. Her eyes dropped. "Then we'll both leave, in shame." Daniel stepped up beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Then let's make sure it accepts us," he said. They placed their hands together on the stone. The crystal pillars around them began to hum, the sound rising until it filled the entire valley. Light flared from the altar, wrapping around them in swirling streams of blue and silver. Lyra's breath caught as warmth spread through her chest. Daniel's grip on her hand tightened. When the light finally faded, the hum softened into silence. Lyra looked down at their joined hands. A faint mark, like intertwined lines, now glowed on their skin. "It accepted us," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel smiled. "Told you," he said. The light from the altar slowly faded, leaving the Valley of Shards quiet once more. Lyra stared at the faint, glowing mark on her hand, tracing it with her fingers, as if she wasn't sure it was real. Her chest felt warm, not just from the bond itself, but from what it meant. Someone had chosen her, not because they had to, not out of pity, but because they wanted to. She lifted her gaze to Daniel, who was still watching her with that steady look she had come to recognize, a look that told her he would not walk away. The journey back through the valley was no easier. Daniel carried her again across the broken ridge, his grip sure and unshaken. Each step seemed lighter this time, not because the path was easier, but because they had crossed the hardest part together. Lyra found herself speaking more freely now, telling him things she had never said out loud before. She told him about the nights she had slept under torn awnings during storms, about the day she stopped calling for help because she realized no one was coming. Daniel listened without interrupting, his silence steady and full of attention. It felt strange to have her words matter to someone. By the time they stepped out of the Valley of Shards, the sun was setting. The sky was painted with streaks of gold and violet, and the village was just ahead. Lyra's stomach twisted. The last time she had come here, it had been under the eyes of people who wanted her gone. Now she was returning with Daniel bonded, protected by law. She wondered if that would change anything, or if the stairs would remain. As they entered the main street, the whispers began again, but they were not the same as before. There was curiosity now, a sharp edge of surprise. Some stepped back, making room for them. Others simply stood still, watching as the two of them made their way to the center of the square. The old woman who had declared the trial stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the mark on their hands. "You completed the trial," she said, her voice carrying. Daniel lifted his hand, showing the intertwined glowing lines. The old woman nodded slowly. "Then by our law, she is no longer outcast." Gasps moved through the crowd. Some looked displeased, others shocked, and a few even bowed their heads slightly as Lyra passed. Lyra sat straighter in her chair, her eyes meeting those of the villagers. For the first time in years, she did not look away. Daniel pushed her toward the market, stopping in front of the same supply shop from before. The shopkeeper froze when he saw them. Daniel's voice was calm. "I believe you have tools for sale." The shopkeeper swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to the bond mark. Yes, of course," he said quickly, fetching the items without another word. As they left the shop, Lyra glanced at Daniel. "You've changed everything," she said quietly. He shook his head. "No, Lyra, we changed it together." Her throat tightened at the word we. It was still new, still strange, but it was real. They spent the night back at the camp, the fire warm against the cool air. Daniel used the new tools to make final adjustments to her cybernetic legs. When he was done, he stepped back and nodded. "Try," he said. Lyra gripped the arms of her chair and slowly pushed herself up. Her legs trembled, the servos humming. Softly, She took one shaky step, then another. Her eyes widened. She was standing. A laugh, raw and disbelieving, escaped her lips. "I'm walking," she whispered. Daniel grinned. "I told you, I'd get you there." She didn't walk far. Her body was still weak, but the feeling of standing on her own was like breathing after years underwater. When she sat again, she found herself smiling without thinking. Daniel caught the expression and smiled back. "You should keep doing that," he said. "What?" she asked, smiling. He replied, "It suits you." Her cheeks warmed, and she looked down, but she didn't stop smiling. Later, as the fire crackled low, she spoke. "Daniel, back in the valley, when you said you wouldn't regret it, you meant it, didn't you?" He didn't hesitate. "I meant every word," he said. She nodded slowly. "Then I'll make sure you never do," she said, her voice steady. The bond mark on her hand pulsed faintly, as if agreeing. Somewhere in the distance, the crystals of the Valley of Shards sang faintly in the wind. But here, in the quiet of their small camp, the sound was softer, almost like a promise. Lyra leaned back, letting the warmth of the fire and the comfort of his presence sink in. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she was not thinking about surviving the next day. She was thinking about living it, and she knew she would never face it alone again.